changed, calmed, and sometimes even for a time entirely cease in them, which associations, as I've already told you, consist mostly of various kinds of what is called rubbish. In consequence, there is then automatically obtained in these three-brained beings there such a combination of functioning in their common presences as temporarily frees the data present in their subconsciousness for the manifestation of the divine impulse conscience, and for its participation in the functioning of their ordinary consciousness, with the result that this said remorse of conscience proceeds in them. And as this remorse of conscience gives rise to the mentioned particular crystallizations which issue from them with their other radiations, the result is that the totality of all these radiations occasionally gives the atmosphere of this planet of yours that particular coloration which hinders the being organ of sight from penetrating freely through it. Here it is necessary to say that these favorites of yours, particularly the contemporary ones, become ideally expert in not allowing this inner impulse of theirs, called remorse of conscience, to linger long in their common presences. No sooner do they begin to sense the beginning, or even only, so to say, the prick of the arising of the functioning in them of such a being impulse, then they immediately, as it is said, squash it, whereupon this impulse, not yet quite formed in them, at once calms down. For this squashing of the beginning of any remorse of conscience in themselves, they have even invented some very efficient special means which now exist there under the names of alcoholism, cocaineism, morphineism, nicotineism, onanism, monkism, Athenianism, and others with names also ending in ism. I repeat, my boy, at a suitable occasion I shall explain to you in detail also about those results issuing from the abnormally established conditions of ordinary existence there, which became factors for the arising and the permanent existence there of this, for them, maleficent assignment of themselves to various castes. I shall without fail explain this to you, because the information elucidating this abnormality there may serve as very good data for your further logical comparisons, for the purpose of better understanding the strangeness of the psyche of these three-brained beings who have taken your fancy. Meanwhile, transubstantiate in yourself the following. When the mentioned particular psychic property of egoism had been completely formed in the common presences of these favorites of yours, and later there had also been formed in them various other secondary impulses already mentioned by me, which ensued and now still continue to ensue from it, and furthermore, in consequence of the total absence of the participation of the impulse of sacred conscience in their waking consciousness, then these three-brained beings arising and existing on the planet Earth, both before the period of the very saintly activities of Ashiata Shiemash, and also since, have always driven and still continue to strive to arrange their welfare during the process of their ordinary existence, exclusively for them themselves. And as in general on none of the planets of our great universe does there or can there exist enough of everything required for everybody's equal external welfare, irrespective of what are called objective merits, the result there is that the prosperity of one is always built on the adversity of many. It is just this exclusive regard for their own personal welfare, that has gradually crystallized in them the already quite particularly unprecedented and peculiar properties of their psyche, which I cited as, for instance, cunning, contempt, hate, servility, lying, flattery, and so on, which in their turn, on the one hand, are factors for an outer manifestation unbecoming to three-brained beings, and on the other hand, are the cause of the gradual destruction of all those inner possibilities of theirs, placed in them by great nature, of becoming particles of the whole of the reasonable whole. Well then, my boy, at the time when the results of the very saintly labors of the essence-loving Ashiata Shiemash had already begun to blend with the processes of what is called their inner and outer being existence, and when, thanks to this, data for the divine impulse conscience, surviving in their subconsciousness, gradually began to share in the functioning of their waking consciousness, then the being existence, both personal and reciprocal, began to proceed on this planet also, almost as it does on the other planets of our great universe on which three-brained beings exist. These favorites of yours also then began to have relations towards each other only as towards the manifestations varying in degree of a unique common creator, and to pay respect to each other only according to the merits personally attained by means of being partikadog duty, that is, by means of personal conscious labors and intentional sufferings. That is why, during that period, there ceased to exist there the said two chief maleficent forms of their ordinary existence, namely their separate independent communities and the division of themselves in these communities into various castes or classes. At that time, also there upon your planet, all the three-brained beings began to consider themselves and those like themselves merely as beings bearing in themselves particles of the emanation of the sorrow of our common Father Creator. And all this then so happened because when the action of the data of the divine being impulse began to participate in the functioning of their ordinary waking consciousness, and the three-brained beings began manifesting themselves toward each other solely in accordance with conscience, the consequence was that masters ceased to deprive their slaves of freedom, and various power-possessing beings of their own accord surrendered their unmerited rights, having become aware by conscience and sensing that they possessed and occupied these rights and positions not for the common welfare, but only for the satisfaction of their various personal weaknesses, such, for instance, as vanity, self-love, self-calming, and so on. Of course, at that period also, there continued to be all kinds of chiefs, directors, and advisor specialists who became such chiefly from difference of age and from what is called essence power, just as there are everywhere on all planets of the universe on which there breed three-brained beings of varying degrees of self-perfecting. And they then became such neither by hereditary right nor by election, as was the case before this blissful Ashiatian epoch, and as again afterwards became, and even till now continues to be the case. All these chiefs, directors, and advisors then became such in accordance with the objective merits they personally acquired, and which could be really sensed by all the beings around them. And it proceeded in the following way. All the beings of this planet then began to work in order to have in their consciousness this divine function of genuine conscience. And for this purpose, as everywhere in the universe, they transubstantiated in themselves what